Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to select a grand jury that will investigate whether there were unlawful attempts to disrupt the administration of the 2020 elections here in Georgia.
A special grand jury has been selected to look into Donald Trump's alleged election interference in Georgia, as another grand jury in New York ends its investigation into the former president's business practices with no indictment. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ghida Fakhry. Donald Trump's legal problems continued this week as a special grand jury in Georgia was impaneled to examine whether the former president pressured state officials to, quote, find enough votes to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country.
And while another grand jury probe into Trump's business dealings in New York wrapped up last week with no criminal charges brought forward, Trump continues to be under investigation by U.S. lawmakers, local district attorneys, a state attorney general, and the FBI for his role in the lead-up to the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol and attempts to block Congress's certification of Joe Biden's electoral victory.
We don't have a lot of experience with coups in our own country, and we think of a coup as something that takes place against a president. This was a coup organized by the president against the vice president and against the Congress in order to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators is calling on Congress to take immediate measures to prevent a coup attempt in the 2024 presidential election by updating the Electoral Count Act, an 1887 law that governs how Congress counts and certifies electoral votes. And over the weekend, at an annual humor and political satire-filled dinner hosted by White House correspondents and attended by sitting U.S. presidents, but which Trump shunned during his time in office, President Biden made light of Trump's boycott of the event.
Just imagine if my predecessor came to this dinner this year. Now that would really have been a real coup if that occurred.
Although Biden joked about Trump's attempt to derail Congress's certification of the 2020 election result, the former president still faces nearly 20 legal proceedings. But will any of the charges against him stick? While some of his close circle of friends and staff have been found guilty of crimes, Trump's ability so far to avoid criminal charges has frustrated many, including my next guest. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal attorney, who served time after being found guilty on several charges, including campaign finance violations during Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, joins me now. Michael Cohen, as one grand jury wraps up in New York, another one in Georgia begins its work. Now, I know you've been very critical of the decision by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg not to prosecute or indict Donald Trump, your former boss. If the evidence, though, is so damning against him, why haven't we seen any criminal charges, any indictment?
You know, that's a question that many New Yorkers are asking, many people around the country and even the world are asking, you know, what happened to Alvin Bragg? This is a man who ran on a platform that he was going to ensure law and order. He was going to ensure that no man is held above the law. And yet, after what, 6 weeks, he made a determination completely that's contradictory to what Mark Pomerantz and Carrie Dunn, both of whom had been working on that matter for almost 2 years.
But the special grand jury sat for a full 6 months. If the evidence against Trump when it comes to his business dealings were so compelling, why didn't the grand jury extend its work and why didn't we see charges brought against him?
Well, again, the person who would have extended it would have been Alvin Bragg. Let's not forget that Cyrus Vance, our former district attorney, went ahead and he indicted the Trump organization along with Alan Weisselberg. And because it was towards the end of his office where he was not going to run for re-election, what he felt the right thing to do would be to allow Alvin Bragg to come in and to push the case forward. Alvin Bragg chose not to do so, despite the multitude of people who provided documentation like myself or testimony, all of which corroborated everything each and every person had stated, that there are significant crimes that were committed. Why he chose not to push forward, I don't know. And it just seems to be part of the sad play of our justice system, that actually there are people that are above the law.
But could it have to do with the lack of credibility of some witnesses? I mean, it's been reported that the district attorney didn't move with criminal charges because he had concerns about you as a credible witness. I mean, you were convicted of lying to Congress. You were convicted of giving false information to a bank over hush money payments during the campaign, tax evasion, campaign finance violations. I mean, he was concerned about your credibility.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a nonsensical story. And I'm not even sure that I've been able to find the report that came from Alvin Bragg's mouth himself. It's allegedly from people who have heard Alvin Bragg make that statement. Mark Pomerantz, who has been literally a lawyer longer than Alvin Bragg has been out of diapers, found there's absolutely zero lack of credibility. Not only did I tell the truth on everything that they asked for, I provided documentary evidence which would have negated the entire issue of my credibility. Documents don't lie, people do. My testimony before the House Oversight Committee, there's no issue about truthfulness. And as far as, just to set you straight on, and many of your viewers, not everybody who pleads guilty is guilty. And I would refer you to Judge Jed Rakoff's article and his book, Why Innocent People Plead Guilty. The story that you think you know about me is not accurate, and it will be reflected in another book that I have coming out in a couple of months called The Department of Injustice. Yes, I made hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Let's also not forget, at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. The only lie that I told to Congress was that the number of times that I spoke to Donald Trump about the failed real estate project, I stated 3 times. In fact, it was 10 times.
All right, and now
it
Donald
had nothing
Trump...
to do with tax evasion. There was no tax evasion. There was no misrepresentation to a bank on a HELOC. And this will all be disclosed in the upcoming book.
And you say you've cooperated with the prosecution. Why haven't they used your documents to the extent possible?
I don't know. That's, again, you have to ask Alvin Bragg. You're asking me to get into the mindset of a man who, for some unknown reason, made a determination that the case was not ripe to go forward. Yet, the 2 prominent lawyers, Carrie Dunn, general counsel to the district attorney's office, and Mark Pomerantz, who's a private lawyer who is an expert in RICO.
But are you saying there was also political pressure on him not to move ahead? And where does it leave the other special grand jury that is now convening in Georgia?
Well, remember,
are we likely to see any indictments there? Look,
again, I'm not a prognosticator. I don't try to, I don't bet on the horses. So far, it appears that Donald Trump and his cohorts have managed to escape responsibility for any of their dirty deeds. I mean, for God's sakes, I went to prison in part because I made hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. It wasn't my affair. It wasn't for my benefit. It wasn't at my direction. It was at the direction and for the benefit of the man who had the affair, Donald J. Trump.
Looking ahead, though, some people wonder whether he is going to run in the 2024 election. Do you think that he will? And what are the chances that some of these legal troubles that he faces, these cases that he is facing, could actually derail any of his plans?
Well, I've been very clear. I don't believe that Donald is going to run in 2024. He knows statistically that he can't win. Moreover, there's a significant number of Republicans, many of whom he thinks are his sycophantic followers, that intend on running. Take a look at like Ron DeSantis. That would be an interesting, look, you guys would love this because this would be perfect. This would be absolutely perfect for television. Watching Ron DeSantis battle Dopey Donald, I mean, that would just be fabulous television. So no, I don't think, on top of that, when he would lose, and I don't think he even becomes the Republican nominee, but if in fact he did and he loses, then he can no longer claim the big lie. That would all be over, and his days of grifting as our grifter in chief, those days would be over.
But this doesn't really gel with the reality, though. You see all of these Republican leaders still swearing allegiance to him. Clearly, he is still in control of the Republican Party.
Listen, I don't know if he is or he isn't. It's a long time before the process, becomes a reality. And as far as I'm concerned, you will start to see people jumping ship away from Donald as the nomination process starts taking place. Right now they're all looking to stay civil with one another in hopes that Donald's followers will end up following them. This is just a political game.
And when you look at the January 6th committee's investigation into Donald Trump, which is coming to an end, and there will be public hearings beginning next month, what is the likelihood that he could be directly linked to inciting the riot? Because there have been thousands of text messages that were shared between his former chief of staff and members of Congress, Fox News anchors and others, but nothing that was directly shared between him and Donald Trump.
Well, I'm not so sure. You say likely could link him to it. We all watched as Donald Trump turned around and he told people, I will see you at the Capitol. We see the extent of the emails between Mark Meadows and others, some of whom were working with burner phones, some were working with their own. You have Eric and Laura Trump, who hijacked the Ellipse rally from this other group. And if you read these text messages, again, I'm not asking people to take my word for it. Look at the Mark Meadows text message. Do you really think Mark Meadows, who's scared of his own shadow, was doing this basically because he felt that he wanted to? This is all done, again, at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump.
But even if it is done at the behest of Donald Trump, it's a different thing altogether for the U.S. Department of Justice to move ahead and press charges against him. Is that going to happen? Could you see this happening?
I could definitely see it happen. And it's actually not, to be a party to it, makes you, complicit in the act itself. Donald Trump was the one who incited the riot. You even hear that from people who are now these poor people. I shouldn't even say poor people. They deserve it. They breached the Capitol. They attacked police officers. They created damage, but they're all now testifying they did it because that's what Donald wanted them to do. So should he be held accountable? I believe so. And certainly he should be held accountable for something. This man has, again, managed to escape any responsibility his entire life.
You were his personal lawyer. How do you explain this? And can he continue to evade justice?
Well, again, you have to turn around and look at the past Donald when he was president and CEO of the Trump Org versus president of the United States of America. He has been found guilty in terms of civil actions. Let's not forget $28 million regarding the Trump University matter. Let's not forget about the $2.5 million regarding the Trump Foundation, all found to be in violation of the law. That also doesn't include the fact that they were found guilty civilly regarding the Trump Soho project. He's been held and found guilty in civil matters. It's the criminal matters that, now have really escalated because of, the actions that he has taken while president of the United States of America. Now, while I acknowledge it's very difficult to charge a president, and worse than that, it's even more difficult to incarcerate a president, because in Donald's head, he still has national security information, and he would sell that information to anybody on the block for a bag of M&Ms or a can of tuna. You could rest assured on that one. But hopefully,
so if you were to bet, do you think he'll be charged criminally in any ongoing case?
I could see him being charged criminally, but I do not see incarceration. It would be probably some sort of a very significant home confinement if in fact found guilty. But nevertheless, the system doesn't really work to put themselves away. They only go after people like me.
All right, Michael Cohen, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to see you.
A federal judge has ruled investigators will have access to thousands of Republican National Committee documents as the congressional inquiry into Donald Trump's alleged role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol proceeds, with public hearings expected to begin next month. Although he's been out of office for almost a year and a half, Trump still looms large over the Republican Party. His endorsement is still sought after by candidates running for office. In fact, a recent poll found that 45% of Republican voters are more likely to vote for a Trump-endorsed candidate in the November midterm elections. Meanwhile, a recently leaked recording of House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy privately expressing concerns about comments made by far-right Republican lawmakers following the U.S. Capitol attack and calling Trump's behavior, quote, unacceptable, illustrates the tensions within the GOP and the unwillingness to criticize the former president and his close allies publicly. Robert Pittenger is a former three-term Republican congressman from North Carolina who served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2013 to 2019. He joins me now. Congressman, many people here in the U.S. believe that Trump incited a violent insurrection to overthrow the government last year and has not been held accountable. Would the attack on the U.S. Capitol have happened without the explicit calls that he made on that day to his thousands of followers who were gathered outside the U.S. Capitol to block the election certification process?
Those individuals are already coming to Washington. They had their intent. I don't think it took Donald Trump to inspire them to do what they wanted to do. It was wrong. It was reckless. It was something that desecrated one of the great institutions of our country, and that being our Congress. So I have no respect for the people who marched in, stormed the Congress, sat in the Speaker's chair, but I can't lay that at the feet of President Trump.
But should he be held responsible for egging his supporters on by telling them to, quote, fight like hell? He says, we fight like hell if we don't. You're not going to have a country anymore. We will never concede. By egging them on the way he did, and shortly after that, his supporters began breaking into the U.S. Congress, should he be held accountable?
No, wait a minute. I think you're assuming his supporters were listening to him speak. I think that's the wrong assumption. They were inspired by their own intent. I think you're jumping to your own conclusions by making that statement.
I'm not jumping to my own conclusions. I mean, the January 6th committee has already said that it has enough evidence to warrant criminal charges brought against the president for what they say was his role in inciting.
It's a Democrat committee. It's a Democrat committee. Of course, they have enough evidence.
There are two Republicans serving on that committee, though.
On the whole probe into Russia. That's what politics is all about, because they've got failed policies. They've got failed policy at the border. They've got failed economic policies. They've got failed policies dealing with China, with Iran, and they're appeared weak. So pursuing and perpetuating this issue is favorable for them.
But what you're doing now, Congressman, is deflecting blame and deflecting attention from the issue. Many of the voters who are now taking part in some of the primaries around the country are fed up. They want to move on. They are fed up with those in the Republican Party who continue to peddle what has been debunked in court case after court case. But do you believe that the President of the United States, at the time, Donald Trump, should have done more to stop the violence that was taking place that
Hindsight is always easier, isn't it? We call it Monday morning quarterbacking in the United States. And the president wasn't in the middle of where they were at the time. I don't think he ever intended for somebody to barge in the Congress and go sit on the Speaker's chair and prop their feet up. It's incredible.
But it isn't about hindsight, though, Congressman. I mean, it took the White House more than 2 hours to order the National Guard to the Capitol. Why wasn't it done earlier? It took Trump almost 3 hours to issue any statement.
Well, bless your heart.
And when he did, he praised his supporters. He told them, you're very special, go home in peace. Not exactly the kind of message you'd expect.
Trump wasn't there to feel the emotion of what was taking place at the Capitol. By the time everybody collected their thoughts.
Well, come on, Congressman, but we saw what happened in real time, and Trump knew what was going on. He was following the events. It took him more than 3 hours to step in, and when he did, he sent mixed messages to his supporters.
I'm sure he wished he'd have done it different today.
Was it anything short of a coup attempt by the President of the United States and his supporters inside of Congress and outside, as one of the January 6th Congressional Committee members, Congressman Jamie Raskin, has said? Is there any other way of looking at it?
Of course they said that. This is all political. This is the same stuff you heard on the Russia collusion. It turned out to be reversed. Of course, they're going to lambaste the president and say that this was something he did. It was illegal. That's the nature of politics. That's the nature of the distraction that they have to perpetuate today because they're failing. Look at their polls. Their polls are down in the 30s right now. They've got a crisis on the border that they won't acknowledge. They have an economy that's failing, that's increasing continually with inflation and hurting particularly people with lower incomes. We have incredible challenges globally, unprecedented that we've ever had worldwide from our adversaries. And this is the name of the game in politics. When you've got problems, throw out a distraction.
Well,
and of course,
precisely, though, the Congressman, by the same token, though, can't you say the same about Republicans, those who continue to peddle, quote, the big lie that the election was stolen, when there is so much more
There's a
that
lot of garbage.
Republicans and Democrats should be focusing on in the next elections?
Could not agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. It's all garbage.
So it's all garbage on both sides of the aisle?
Yes, that's what politics is. It's a bunch of dirty garbage. It is people on the right and super left who drives these messages as distractions. And we need people who are policymakers in Congress. We need people who come together to solve major problems. We have economically, we have security-wise, for maintain this sovereign country. And right now, there's a failure because of distractions of all these issues that the media loves. People like you love these stories because it's inflammatory. It gets out there, people talk about it, and we lose focus on what's going to help the real person, their bread and butter issues in their lives.
But you're deflecting all the blame on Democrats. Shouldn't people be legitimately upset as well and angry at Republicans?
I just said that the people who were protesting about the election, that their guy didn't win, Mr. Trump, are just mad. They're upset because their lives are not better off today, they're worse off. And so they're going to say whatever comes out of their mouth.
Many people here, including Joe Biden, and yes, many Democrats have been warning about the direction the Republican Party has taken in recent years.
I'd be more concerned with the direction the Progressive Party has taken with the Democrats. Joe Biden is voting a total progressive ticket today.
Well, he may be, but there's growing extremism within the GOP.
There's extremists on both sides, but the progressive movement controls the Democrat Party today.
The Anti-Defamation League found that more than 100 candidates on various ballots in 2022 explicitly embraced extremism or violence. Why isn't the GOP leadership doing more to condemn extremism within its ranks?
Of course they say it. Of course they do. We all are against extremism and violence. That's nonsense.
Well, they don't publicly.
I sure enjoyed the time being with you. This has been a wonderful time, and I wish you all the best.
Hold on. If they did, though, Congressman, hold on. All right, Congressman. Thank you very much. The convening of a special grand jury in Georgia may well ultimately result in the first criminal indictment of a former U.S. president. While a special grand jury does not issue indictments, it has broader investigative powers than a regular grand jury, as well as the power to issue subpoenas for witness testimony. This will only happen after Georgia's May 24th primary, in which several key state officials, including Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, who was pressured by the former president to, quote, find the votes needed to overturn the state's election result in his favor, is locked in a tight re-election race with a Trump-endorsed challenger. Although many believe the odds of an indictment in this case are very high, given the smoking gun evidence, an hour-long taped phone conversation during which Trump tried to compel Georgia's Secretary of State to, quote, find 11,780 votes to overturn Joe Biden's victory in the southern state, the Republican Party is still standing firmly behind Trump, at least publicly, and very few Republicans are willing to distance themselves from Trump ahead of the midterms. What we are witnessing today is the test of a bipolar American political system, which has worked and served the United States relatively well, certainly in terms of political stability. But that was appended, not only with the attempted January 6th insurrection and attempted coup against the constitutional order, but before that, with dozens of frivolous legal challenges of electoral results following what government officials, judges, and elected leaders, overwhelmingly Republican, publicly deemed to be the country's most secure election. With the U.S. Justice Department vowing to hold, quote, all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy, the Attorney General's reluctance so far to do so shows his political predicament. And so, in short, the greater ultimate test is whether the legal system in a country where judges are appointed essentially along party lines will do its work and go where the evidence leads rather than engage in political calculus. And in this case, the evidence is a smoking gun. The voice on the tape was clear, and what was being asked of Georgia's Secretary of State even clearer. That's all from me, Ghida, Fakhry, and the team here in Washington. Thanks for watching.